Welcome to your first practice.
I can tell the tape on the box has been peeled off and retaped 100 times because the sticky part is fuzzy with bits of cardboard and the whole strip is flapping in the breeze. He tells us to line up, that we're getting our uniforms. He hands Maximilian a notebook and pencil and says,
"Write down what I say."
We all stand in front of the bench, and Principal Measley reaches his hand in the box and pulls out a pile of unfolded school uniforms, white with green numbers. He shakes out a jersey and tosses it to Quinn. He points at her.
"Quinn?"
he says, like he hasn't been her principal since kindergarten. Quinn nods.
"Number 21, Quinn,"
Measley says. Maximilian writes it down. He points to Emmy and peels another uniform off the pile.
"Emmy, number 6.
Maximilian writes. I shift my feet a little and try to see the numbers on the jerseys bunched in his hand. I shoot a glance to Eliana, and I know we're both thinking this isn't how it's supposed to go. We're supposed to tell Principal Measley what positions we play, have a couple of practices, and prove that we should be number 10. It's not supposed to be just random like this. Like our numbers don't even matter. Georgia gets 12. Tess gets 4. Micah is 16. Then Principal Measley gets to Cece. Ms. R doesn't come to soccer practices because she works for the school and her day ends at 3 o'clock. But Cece signed that she didn't care. She would play anyway.
"Cecilia,"
he says. I think she can see her long name on his lips because she curves her hand in the letter C. Cece, we tell him. Her name is Cece.
"Okay, Cece, then."
He tosses her the next jersey.
"Number 10.
Eliana and I both say, "But Principal Measley," at the same time. That's my number, I tell him. I've always been number 10. Me too, Eliana says. He tells us to relax, and that our numbers don't matter. Like we don't know that number 10 controls the field, that number 10 is the playmaker, that number 10 should be double-teamed, triple-teamed, that number 10 is a not-so-secret weapon.
"Got that, Maximilian?"
He nods and writes it down and gives me a look like he's sorry. I shake my head, and Principal Measley tosses me number 1, and I look at him like he better not be thinking for 1 second I'm going to be in goal. Number 1 is a goalie's number, and I'll tell you one thing, that's not me. Eliana gets 9. Striker, goal scorer, brilliant finisher, making flashy runs into the penalty box and one-touching into the corners, then pulling your shirt over your face and celebrating as the team lifts you up because you scored the game winner in the last minute. She smiles at me, but I whisper back, "He says our numbers don't matter, remember?" And she looks at me like, "You know they do." Principal Measley assigns the rest of the numbers and tells us to pull our jerseys on over our shirts. I don't know how to assign that to Cece, but she's looking at Fern and Nell pulling on their uniform tops, so she follows and pulls number 10 over her head. These don't smell washed, Kara says.
"That's because they're not,"
he answers. Ew. Georgia looks at Cece and plugs her nose and makes a gross face and pretends she's trying to wave the stink out of her jersey. Cece laughs and plugs her nose too.
"If you can't handle sweat, you can call it quits right now. Just let me know."
I almost say I don't see him wearing other people's old sweat, but I bite my tongue in the back of my mouth, and he tells us we're going to start with a little running.
2 laps.
He blows the whistle around his neck, and we all take off around the field. Emmy starts out in front, and Eliana and I are right behind her. We're all running together because this is a warm-up. But when we round our lap, we hear Principal Measley say,
"Number 6, fast start."
Maximilian writes it down. Our second lap doesn't feel like a warm-up anymore. It feels like a race. Emmy is still out front, but I'm gaining on her, and Eliana is right on my heels. As soon as Cece sees us all picking up the pace, she does too, and zooms to the front of the pack and is neck and neck with Emmy. I look back and see Georgia and Fern trailing, and Nell is last, almost half a field behind us. We cross by Principal Measley and collapse, breathing hard, and I hear him say something about number 1 and number 9 and number 10, but my heart is beating too hard in my ears, so I can't make out what he says. Maximilian keeps writing. We wait for Nell and clap when she crosses, but Principal Measley hollers,
"You're the last one, number 13. You gotta do better than that."
At first, I'm mad he called her out like that, but then I'm also relieved I wasn't the last one, and I hate that I have that feeling. Then he says something under his breath to Maximilian. "What did you say?" I ask.
"I'm just making notes,"
Principal Measley says.
"For myself, figuring out what positions everyone can play. Who has skills?"
he says. I look at Maximilian, but he keeps his eyes on the paper. Eliana cuts in. "I can tell you what position I play. I've played midfield for—"
"Got it,"
he says, then blows his whistle. And the way he's acting makes me wonder if he's trying to get one of us to quit so he can say I told you so, and that we don't have enough players for a team, and then he can go back to coaching the boys 5 days a week. I put my arm around Nell's shoulders and tell her she did great and that first days always stink. She's breathing hard and trying not to cry, but it doesn't work. Tears start falling down her cheeks and landing on her wrinkly uniform. I glare at Principal Measley, and I see him lean toward Maximilian and say something else. Maximilian hesitates and shakes his head and taps the eraser of his pencil 4 times on the notebook page. Principal Measley chuckles and nudges him.
"You can go ahead and write sensitive next to your name then,"
he says, and snickers again like he's so funny, but Maximilian isn't laughing. Then Measley points to the notebook and gives him a look like, "Right," and leans in toward him again. But I know Maximilian. He won't write anything mean about anybody because he's not mean. He's my best friend. Cece taps me on the shoulder and is holding her arms out like she wants to know what's going on, and I wish I knew the signs for Principal Measley is the worst ever. But instead, I point to Nell's tears and then to Measley, and it looks like Cece can read my face and read Nell's tears and Principal Measley's body language, because she puts her arm around Nell too. Next, we practice dribbling, and Principal Measley's blowing his whistle for us to dribble and stop, and dribble and change directions, and dribble again. Cece dribbles with her head up, watching Principal Measley's whistle, then watching what we do. She has good control of the ball the whole time because she almost never needs to look down. Eliana has quick ball handling skills, dribbling around the cones in the 18-yard box. I do a couple of moves. A step-over scissor around a make-believe defender. Then I dribble right up to Measley and fake right and go left around him so he can see how much control I have over the ball. So he'll put me in midfield. Principal Measley is still calling out numbers and notes to Maximilian. And even though Measley is the worst ever creeping water bug, I still want 100 good notes next to my number. Notes like fast and strong left foot. Kara loses her ball outside of the box and hustles off to get it before Principal Measley notices. Then Tess and Emmy crash into each other, and instead of laughing and collecting their balls and dribbling on, they look at Measley, hoping he didn't see. Then they yell at each other. "Watch where you're going," Tess says. "What's your problem?" Principal Measley sees them and whispers something to Maximilian. Maximilian shakes his head, and I can hear Measley telling him about how sports isn't all rainbows and unicorns, and the girls have to get used to that.
"Am I right?"
he says, and gives him another little nudge. I want to tell him that Maximilian doesn't like jokey little nudges, but I just keep dribbling. I slow down and bring the ball close to the sideline so I can try to hear more. But Measley just calls us in and says the last thing we'll do today is shots on goal. He tells Maximilian to get in goal. "I don't play, Principal Measley, just numbers for me." But Measley isn't listening and tosses Maximilian a pair of goalie gloves.
Well, you're in goal today.
I can see him starting to shake his head and breathe heavy, and Measley isn't doing a thing about it. And everyone on the team is looking around and down like, no way do I want to play goalie. So I stop rolling the ball beneath my left cleat and run to him. It's okay, Maximilian. I'll be in goal. I take the gloves and sneak a squeeze in the web between his thumb and forefinger and whisper, 8, 16, 24. He takes a breath and whispers, 32, and slides the notebook on the bench and sits down next to it. I put on the old, crusty goalie gloves. They're too big, so I pull the Velcro tight on my wrists and give them a clap. Little bits of the padding from the palms crumble off. Measley mumbles something about how he's being nice even counting Maximilian as a manager. Then he calls,
Hey, you're up first!
Eliana pops her orange mouthguard back in and sets the ball up on the penalty kick line. She takes 3 big steps back and glares straight into the left corner of the net. But I bet she's trying to fake me out, and she's really going right, so just as she's about to strike the ball, I dive right and feel the ball smack against my gloves. It clears the post. What a save! Emmy calls. I don't want to be good at goalie, though, because I want to play midfield. But I also don't want to look bad and get cruddy notes next to my name. And I'm not one for not trying my best, so I take a few hops and get ready for the next shot. Eliana jogs off, shaking her head, and Cece's next. She smiles at me with her bright blue mouthguard and waves her crossed fingers back and forth. I remember from Ms. Blaze's classroom wall that crossed fingers like that is an R in the ASL alphabet. Cece signs it again, and her face is asking a question. Ready? I nod, and she backs up 4 little steps. She doesn't strike it as hard as Eliana, so I see it sailing to the upper left corner. I jump and punch it up over the goal. Measley claps and nods his head.
Atta girl!
And I hate that feels pretty good. I save Micah's. Georgia misses wide. Nell scores in the upper right corner. Jamie sends it sailing over the top of the goal, and Fern's shot barely makes it to me, so I scoop it up easily. At the end of practice, Principal Measley hands out copies of our schedule and says he'll see us Thursday. Eliana is following him as he picks up the cones, and she's saying, I've played midfield since 2nd grade, and I can strike with both feet. But he just turns and tells Maximilian to collect the balls. Eliana continues, and I can flip throw-in. I can too, I call. Measley nods and grabs the last cone off the field.
And please remind your parents I have a don't talk to me during the games policy. They can find me another time if they want to.
I think of his locked door, do not disturb, and think, yeah, right. We all pass the balls slowly over to Maximilian, and he shoos them in the bag, then cinches the top and hands it to Principal Measley. Maximilian whispers, thank you, to me, and I put my hands on his shoulders. Wendell honks from the parking lot, and Maximilian waves to him, then walks across the field to our path back to the condos. I pull off my jersey number 1, and when Principal Measley turns his back and all the girls are unlacing their cleats and pulling on their sweatshirts, I see his notebook on the bench. Maximilian is supposed to keep track of that, so I quickly slide it into my backpack with my stinky uniform and start jogging toward Wendell's car.
Hey there, soccer star,
Wendell says.
I didn't know you could play in goal, too.
Yeah, I answer, but that was just today. We don't have a goalie yet.
You were amazing.
Wendell starts the car.
And Coach Measley knows the old rule. If you don't have a keeper, put your best athlete back there because they'll pick it up the quickest.
Principal Measley doesn't know anything, I tell him. He was pushing Maximilian to be in goal, which, if you know Maximilian for 1 second, you know that soccer balls flying at his face is not a good idea. That's why I was in goal, not because Measley knows anything.
I see,
Wendell says.
Well, I'm glad you got a chance to show your stuff.
It's silent for a moment. Then he taps his fingers on the wheel and says,
I'm sorry I cut you off last night. Bryce was out of line. So was Coach Measley.
Thanks, I say. Then it's silent for a little longer, and I'm thinking about how it sounds weird to hear Wendell call him Coach Measley. Because I'll tell you one thing, I'm not calling him Coach. No way.
Well,
Wendell says,
he has to know something if he's got such a winning record. 9 straight seasons.
And I know he's trying to make me feel better, but I don't want to feel better yet. I just want to be mad for a minute and have Wendell be quiet. He doesn't want our team to win. He wants us to quit, actually.
B, that's not true.
He pulls the car in the driveway, and I look him straight in the eyes to make sure he's listening. It is true. He squinches his eyebrows together and puts his hand on my shoulder. Then he says he has to go get Tucker at band practice, and he'll be right back. Bryce and Mom are at the kitchen stools, and Bryce is showing her Ms. Kravitz's iPad. So I can listen to the book while I follow along. He plugs in the earbuds and holds one to my mom's ear.
This is the coolest,
she says.
I wish I had this when I was in school.
I drop my bag on the floor, and Mom looks up and pulls the earbud out.
B, how was it?
She comes over and kisses me on the head. Shouldn't you be sitting or lying or getting your pelvis up, whatever that means? Mom laughs and says,
After a day of desk work, standing feels great.
But I point to the couch, and she says,
Okay,
and lies down with a pillow beneath her hips. Bryce puts both earbuds in his ears and keeps reading.
So?
She asks. It was pretty terrible. Principal Measley almost made Maximilian spin out of control, and he didn't even care what numbers we wanted. Then I ended up playing goalie, and I was pretty good, so I'll probably be stuck there all season. Mom is shaking her head and asking about Maximilian, and she's not lying down anymore, and the pillow from her hips has slipped. Mom, I say, and I point for her to lie back down. Pelvis. She takes a deep breath and lies back down, and I bite my tongue in the back of my mouth and say, It's okay. Don't worry about Measley. I got this. Mom says okay, but to keep her in the loop, and that she's going to head out for a little walk before it gets too dark.
The doctor said that was okay, remember?
I tell her to take it easy, and she promises. Then I grab my bag, and I'm heading upstairs to take a shower when Bryce pulls his earbuds out. What number did you get? I sign 1 to him, and he laughs. Keeper? No, I say. He just assigned them randomly. Randomly? That's not what he did for us. There's a fire in my gut. Who got number 10? He asks. Cece, I say. And even though I don't ask him, he says, I'm 10. We just have to wait for our new uniforms to get here later this week. New uniforms? Yeah, he says. They're coming right before our first game. Then he puts his earbuds in and goes back to reading. I run up the stairs and slam my door and press my face into my pillow and scream through the cotton case and into the squishy filling where my scream gets trapped. I scream and scream because Bryce is number 10, and their numbers matter. And I scream and scream because those stinky uniforms Measley tossed at us during practice were the boys' old hand-me-downs. When I stop screaming, I can hear Wendell's and Tucker's muffled voices outside talking to someone, and I'm wondering if it's Aliana, but I don't want to go downstairs. So I tiptoe into Bryce's room so I can look out his window to the front yard. His shin guards are hanging from the knob on his closet door, and his floor is covered with clothes. I step over a pair of dirty soccer socks and crumpled jeans, and I kind of have to lean over his desk to see all the way out the window. And when I do, I knock a stack of notebooks off his desk. I'm hoping he still has his earbuds in downstairs, because I'm imagining him running up and catching me in his room and complaining to Wendell, and then no one will ever believe me that Bryce ever does anything wrong. I quickly pick up the notebooks and stick them back on his desk, and I'm pretty sure he won't notice a thing because his desk is as messy as his floor. Except a picture falls from one of the notebooks and lands face up on a pair of shorts on his floor. And as I'm trying to pick up the picture by the very corner so my fingers don't touch his clothes, I see that the picture is of the Valentines. All of the Valentines. It's one of those professional photos where they're all wearing the same thing, jeans and white shirts, and they're sitting out in front of the garden at their old house. Their mom is in the middle holding Bryce, who is sleeping and wearing a white onesie. Wendell sits behind them, with his arms around her, and he's looking down at the baby, and Cameron and Tucker are smiling right at the camera. They are both missing front teeth. The picture makes me sad, like I'm looking in on a big in-between time that only the Valentines should ever see. But I can't stop looking at it. How they're all matching, like a team. Then I hear the voices outside again, and I quickly stuff the picture back in a notebook and look outside. There's a new car in Aliana's driveway, and Wendell and Tucker are talking with a man who's wearing black pants and a long jacket. They shake hands with him and say a few more things, then make their way toward the house, and I wonder if that's Aliana's dad. I hustle out of Bryce's room and back to my own, then unzip my backpack. Principal Measley's notebook is shoved in with my stinky, wrinkly, hand-me-down No. 1 jersey. I open it to the page from today's practice. On one side, our names are jotted by our numbers. On the other are the notes about us, all in Maximilian's handwriting. Number 21, Quinn. No first touch. Number 6, Emmy. Fast start. No stamina. Number 12, Georgia. Agreeable. Could play anywhere. Number 4, Tess. Clumsy. Number 16, Micah. Weak shot. Number 10, Cece. Surprisingly quick. Hard to coach. Number 13, Nell. Out of shape. Sensitive. Number 9, A. Skills. Ego. Number 8, Fern. No power. Number 15, Kara. No control. Number 18, Jamie. Slow. Number 1, B. Goalie. Attitude. I rip the page right out of the notebook and crumple it and throw it across my room straight at the share with Bryce wall and grab the pillow that still has my scream from earlier trapped in it, and I scream again. I scream because Principal Measley is turning Maximilian into a clinging molecule, and I scream because Principal Measley is the creepiest creeping water bug that ever existed. I scream until I'm out of breath. Then I bite my tongue in the back of my mouth and I think, we're going to sink him. 14.